Ladies and gentlemen, our program will begin in 1 minute. Please welcome CEO of FII Institute, Richard Attias.
Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to the second edition of the FII Institute series. Thank you all for joining us as we discuss one of the most critical issues of our time and a core pillar of the FII Institute, sustainability and climate action. We have more than 2,000 participants connected from 120 countries. I can guarantee you that the next 90 minutes will be very inspiring, and I really encourage you to not miss what our great speakers, which I would like to thank, will share with us. The crisis has made clear both the risks and the costs of neglecting our natural environment and our planet. The message that we want to deliver today, which is deeply connected to the message that we shared 2 months ago when we spoke about COVID-19, is don't forget our planet. So now let's see a short video to help set the stage for the discussions we will have during this event.
The crisis we face has made clear the cost of neglecting our environment. Today, 1 in 4 species is at risk of extinction. And while emissions have dropped as a result of the pandemic, the trend is still a dangerously upwards one. Fortunately, the way out of the recession lies in reconnecting with our natural world. A sustainable recovery is not only desirable, it is also more efficient in creating jobs, upgrading infrastructure, and delivering financial returns. Nature-based solutions create new avenues for growth, innovation, and markets. We must change how we value and connect with the planet as individuals, as companies, and as investors. It is time to think big. Today, the FII Institute is gathering the world's brightest minds to chart a global sustainable recovery plan and explore how technology can help us reconnect with the one thing we should never forget about: our planet. FII Institute, creating positive, sustainable impact on humanity.
Now, I would like to ask the chairman of the FII Institute and the governor of the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia to officially open and start our virtual event. So please welcome on this virtual stage His Excellency Yasser Arumaya. Your Excellency.
Thank you, Richard. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to the FII Institute. Thank you all for joining us. This is a truly exciting and inspiring event designed to bring the world's foremost thought leaders together in conversation. A virtual joining of minds and hands in search for answers to the most pressing problems and brighter future for humanity. In this way, the Institute is a pioneer. Our approach is to go from idea to results in 3 steps: think, act, and exchange. It's an effective model, overcoming the roadblocks, which is the thinking part, catalyzing innovation, mobilizing partners is the acting part, and sharing knowledge, which is the exchange part. Now, in this second event, in the series of the Institute's virtual events, and hopefully we will have one more before our next FII in October in Riyadh, we are focused on the crucial topic of sustainability in a world trying to heal. As our focus shifts to recovery, it's clear that a path of sustainability is truly the path worth pursuing. The first step in the recovery journey is the public-private partnership for strong collaboration and open dialogue. Such partnerships should be geared towards achieving a balanced outcome of generated value in a short run and sustainable horizon for the future, with patience as our companion at every step. To that end, the importance of public-private partnerships to help drive a sustainable recovery cannot be overstated. The private sector takes the proactive approach, leading the growth for such sectors through the right allocation of resources and continuous strategies for improvement and expansion over the long term. Such efforts create a ripple effect, activating new sectors and launching new projects that can produce a limited number of public-private partnerships. And with them come new possibilities that enable the private sector to explore the potential in sustainable sectors throughout long-term results. Such partnerships let us follow global trends, being creative in our own way, and driving change. 5 examples from Saudi Arabia's experience prove this point. We explored the recycling sector in a company that we've established, the Saudi Investment Recycling Company, taking the whole value chain of recycling. We have given significant focus on energy efficiency, launching Tarshid, and we started with the government buildings, trying to cut down the power consumption. We realized the importance of alternative energy. PIF's stake in Aqua Power shows that. Aqua Power will start its first PV complex of 300 megawatt in Skaka. And finally, Saudi Aramco, the kingdom's global energy and chemical enterprise, that started its environmental program in 1963, well before the global movement took shape. Its program includes carbon capture, utilization, and storage technologies, which has potential to make oil and gas emission going down to zero. We are also proud of being a founding member of the One Planet Initiative, championed by President Macron of France to work on climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that the examples I've discussed today show the power of human ingenuity, which does its greatest work not in isolation, but in cooperation. A viewpoint in line with the FII inclusive philosophy for all and with all. While COVID-19 has created great hardship and suffering around the world, recovery gives us an opportunity to hit the reset button. A more sustainable reset for jobs, infrastructure, and financial returns, for innovation and markets, serving all humanity for generations to come. I'm proud of the progress of the FII community since our first virtual event early this year. This program is a great companion to our FII conference, which in 3 years has become one of the world's top conferences. And we are just getting started. So finally, I want you to leave with one takeaway out of this webinar. Please do not forget our planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and we'll do our best to not forget our planet. So now I want to remind you all that your participation is important and we want to hear from you, to be interactive. So please submit your questions in the box on the right side of your screen, and the moderators will try to feature as many as possible. And please also feel free to view the event agenda and the biographies of our speakers by clicking the information tab on the left of your program scheme. In case you face any technical issue, please feel free to refresh the pages. Now, before I introduce our first guest, there is a question we want to ask you all. So let's bring up the first polling questions. Looking back at this moment, 10 years from now, which means in the year 2030, do you think you would have done enough, both personally and professionally, to combat climate change? Let's vote. We have to wait to be sure that the 100,000+ participants are able to vote and to choose between yes and no, and we will see the result as soon as we collect a maximum of answers. So, unfortunately, the no is almost 60+%, while the yes is under 35%. So, our next speaker truly doesn't not need an introduction. She is an environmental hero, a true inspiration, and forgive me for being selfish today and deciding to have the conversation with her myself, because she is one of the people I admire the most in the world. So before welcoming her on stage, let's watch a video that I think will help set the tone for our next session.
It's been an amazing journey, this life of mine. This planet has filled me with the wonder of all living things, great and small. We cannot ignore this earth that surrounds us, that feeds us, shelters us, replenishes our bodies and our souls, and stretches our imaginations, where animals, plants, air, water, all care for us. We're all interconnected. People, animals, our environment. When nature suffers, we suffer. And when nature flourishes, we all flourish. I do believe in the possibility of a world where we can live in harmony with nature, but only if every one of us does our part to make that world a reality, so that when you look back over your journey, your life, you can truly say, I did make a difference.
So please welcome the founder of the Jane Goodall Institute and UN Messenger of Peace, Dr. Jane Goodall. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Goodall. It's a pleasure, it's an honor.
Well, it's a very great honor for me. Thank you so much for inviting me today.
So, Dr. Goodall, my first question is, how do you react to our audience polling result, which is, I think, a huge majority of saying that we're not doing enough and we will not be doing enough for the next 10 years?
Well, I suppose that it's based on past experience. You know, everybody was all excited after the Paris Agreement, and all the different countries had guaranteed they were going to control their own emissions, but basically not so much happened. So I suppose people have lost faith. That's the only reason I can think of for that. Maybe if the question was posed differently and it was, will you commit to doing the best you can professionally and personally? I hope that the answer would have been different.
I hope so. Before we talk about the planet, Dr. Goodall, what is your reaction to the current pandemic and the response by global leaders?
Well, first of all, I think the response has been pretty good on the whole. And, you know, if only global leaders had responded with the same urgency to the climate crisis, we'd be in a very different place now. But the entire pandemic, it's very tragic because it's our fault. We brought this upon ourselves. We have not been listening to the scientists studying these zoonotic diseases. That's diseases that jump from an animal to a person. They've been predicting a pandemic like this for so long now. And it's because of our disrespect of the environment and our disrespect of animals that this has come about. We've been destroying the natural world. This means that animals who normally wouldn't interact get pushed closer together, and they get closer and closer to human beings. And as people go into the forest or what other habitat it is to hunt, kill, capture animals, all of this is creating a wonderful environment for a virus or a bacteria, pathogen, to jump from an animal to a person. If we were not continually destroying the environment, such opportunities wouldn't arise. But this disrespect of animals goes further. It's not only hunting them for people to eat, it's hunting them, capturing them, and trading them, trafficking them, sending them around the world, so that thousands go to the wild animal meat markets of Asia, and there in the most terrible, unhygienic conditions, never mind the cruelty, it's very cruel. Animal species that normally wouldn't interact are close together. Very often they're killed on the spot. The seller and the buyer can be contaminated with blood, urine, feces. And this, again, this is an ideal environment for a virus to hop over from one animal to one person, which is what happened with this COVID-19 virus. It also happened with SARS. It happened with MERS. That was a hop over from a domestic camel in the Middle East. It happened with HIV/AIDS, that terrible pandemic that is still continuing in some parts of the world, where chimpanzees were butchered in 2 separate parts of Central Africa. And there are many other zoonotic diseases that have resulted from our disrespect of animals. And it's not just wild animals either. We have to realize that these intensively farmed animals, these factory farms, which have been likened to concentration camps for animals, that too pushes animals close together. They're stressed. And apparently when animals are very stressed, it makes it easier for the virus to hop over into a human. And so as long as we go on disrespecting animals and the environment and realize that this also has led to climate change, it's not just pandemics which affect our health, it's climate change which affects the future of our own species and every other creature living on the planet.
Dr. Goodall, what makes this crisis also a unique opportunity to put the world back on sustainable track?
Well, I think people have been thinking. I know many people have contacted me and said, that they found it so wonderful to be able to hear the birds sing in a city, to see wildlife, to see the air clearing. And people have been thinking that they don't want to go back to the old polluted ways. But this isn't easy. And especially with some of the world leaders today really just longing to get back to business as usual, it's going to be even more difficult. But if we go back to business as usual, we've got to realize that unlimited economic development on a planet with finite natural resources doesn't make sense, especially when some of those resources have been used up more quickly than nature can replenish them. And at the same time, our human population is growing. 7.2 billion of us today, predicted to be 9.7 or even 10 billion by 2050. How will the planet cope? And we need a new definition of success. Must it always be accumulation of wealth and material goods? Must we have this materialistic outlook? Must we lose all kinds of spiritual connection with the natural world?
What is your definition of success?
Well, I think a successful person is one who achieves what he or she wants to achieve. And of course, sometimes that means lots of money. So we have to say that's successful for that person. I'm trying to think of a different measure of success, which is to attain what you want, which makes you happy, where you can bring happiness to your family and your friends, where you can enjoy each day and not always be worrying about the bottom line. So a more peaceful, more relaxed way of living, which of course some people still live that way. I know many people in the global South who have a very different way of living than us in the global North.
Dr. Goodall, as the people who will pay for it and the ones with the most at stake, the youth should have a say in how the world will be rebuilt. Your organization, Roots and Shoots, works with the youth across the world for almost 30 years. What are the new ways in which we can help the youth, have a voice in how we shape the recovery efforts?
Well, having worked with young people, young people of all ages, from kindergarten through university and older too, once you listen to their voice, once you respect them, and once you empower them to take action, it's unbelievable the way that they are tackling the world, the problems in the world around them. So the main message of Roots and Shoots, which is for everybody, is that every single day we live, we make some impact on the planet. And we have a choice as to the kind of impact we make. We do need to alleviate poverty, because when you're really poor, you don't have the thinking about the future. And you know, there's an expression, think globally, act locally. But if you honestly, I'm sure everybody listening, if you think globally, you feel pretty depressed sometimes. But if you look locally and see, what can I do? What can I do myself? And you see that you can make a difference. You and your friends make a difference. You know that other young people around the world are making a difference. And so now you dare to think globally. And part of Roots and Shoots, which is to help people, to help animals, to help the environment, because we're all interconnected. Springing out of this program has come an organization that is breaking down the barriers that we build between people of different nations, people with different languages, different cultures, different religions, people who are young and old, rich and poor. And the young people are beginning to understand that far more important than the color of your skin is the fact that when you fall and hurt yourself, the blood is the same, your tears are the same. When you laugh and you get that wonderful feeling, laughing is very important for us. We should all laugh more. Then our laughter is the same. It gives us that same feeling. We are one human family. And so Roots and Shoots is really my passion. You know, there's a saying, we haven't inherited this planet from our ancestors. We borrowed it from our children. We have not been borrowing our children's future. We have been stealing it, and we're still stealing it today. But if we get together with them, listen to them, work with them, empower them, help to fund some of the projects, like they're planting millions of trees, then indeed we can look forward to a much better world, because they don't want to get back to the old way of doing things.
Dr. Goodall, if you allow me, I would like to ask you a last question, and thank you again for your time. You have dedicated your life to protecting the planet. So what advice, what call to action do you have for our audience today? And what is your call to action to the G20 leaders who will meet in Riyadh in November?
Well, as I said, every single one. By the way, I must interject there that thanks to the chimpanzees being so like us, my studies of the chimpanzees' behavior, along with their biological similarity, forced science to admit that we humans are not the only beings on the planet with personalities, minds, and emotions. Animals are sentient beings, whether we breed them to eat, whether they're wild in the forest, they are individuals with personalities. They can feel fear, pain, and joy. So we really need to think how we interact with each other, how we interact with nature. And the leaders in this G20, I mean, they're in a position, I can make some small difference each day, but they can make a huge difference. They can make a huge difference. So I would beg those leaders, as they make decisions about the future, to think of their children and grandchildren, to think of all this beauty that's on our planet that we're destroying, to think that as we continue to destroy the forests, we are destroying the most important way of mitigating the effects of climate change, while new technology is developed that will enable us to live in greater harmony with nature. Think about our own environmental footsteps and try and encourage others, and try not to be selfish. It was Mahatma Gandhi who said, "This planet can provide for human need, but not human greed." That's what's been going on. But we can all do something about it, each single one of us. And some people can do far more than others.
Thank you so much, Dr. Goodall, for this very inspiring discussion. You have definitely set the tone for this event and the rest of the discussion that will follow. I cannot wait to see you in person. Thank you for making the effort to be connected from your country house. And I hope to see you very soon, if not in UK, to welcome you in Riyadh at the FII annual meeting. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Well, thank you very much. And then we can have a proper hug.
Definitely. Yes. Thank you.
Please welcome international journalist and broadcaster at the BBC, Ms. Tanya Beckett.
Hello, and it's a great privilege to be part of this discussion this afternoon. I'm absolutely delighted that we're talking about this subject, despite the fact that the backdrop is so difficult, because, of course, it does provide a springboard for thinking and really a change of path in terms of sustainability. We know that the cornerstone of any sustainable change, any sustainable future, has to be within the energy sector. Without really any sort of dramatic transformation there, it is going to be very difficult to make progress. We know also that we've heard from the oil majors recently in the past few months announcing ambitious plans to become net zero by 2050. Now, they're going to have to put their money where their mouth is, because that means a very substantial change in capital expenditure. And without that, those targets simply are not going to be met. So why not turn to Saudi Arabia first and ask the country that produces just about 15% of the annual oil output how it plans to deliver on this future and what the vision is. So without more ado, allow me please to introduce His Royal Highness Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman Al Saud, who is the Minister of Energy for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and has been in the job since September last year. So it's been a busy few months. Your Royal Highness, just if you would, put the recent months aside and explain what you see as the vision for the kingdom in this context of a sustainable future and this transformation of the energy sector.
If I can get the camera right, yes. Well, first of all, I'm grateful for this opportunity. I certainly had a challenging 9 months. I started with a supply crisis because of what happened to Abqaiq and Khurais with this malicious attack on our facilities. And then there were quite a few substantial issues that I had to attend to, including Corona and how to mitigate and live with the virus and how we can contain the impact of it and certainly our well-being as human. I still believe that the coronavirus impact is more of a human impact rather than economical in terms of the first degree of impact. The human loss, the disruptions of education, the disruption of healthcare, the disruption of economic activities are all are compounded into making our life tougher and harder. But it gives us an opportunity to provide for, to live up to the challenge and ensure that while mitigating the impact of the virus itself, we still are adhering and attending to our sustainability objectives and growth and maintaining our programs in action as they were, albeit with this massive challenge that we all have to attend to it. It's also an opportunity to see how the world is being interconnected, and how much IT is providing us to enable us to continue the dialogue, to enable us to carry on I've attended serious meetings with regard to energy. Probably the two most fundamental events that I've ever thought I would ever attend when it comes to bringing stability to energy markets, and they were done virtually. And that tells you a lot about how the transformation that had happened over the last few years, decades, and how much it is providing us with these abilities that were and enablers that were not in existence even a decade or two ago.
What sort of, when we talk about this redirection of capital expenditure, what does this mean for Saudi Arabia? How does it affect that?
Well, it is challenging to move away from our agenda as we had it before the virus itself. But I still believe that it is we are in the process of mitigating, and we are mitigating, and we're living with that thing. I believe our energy agenda as Saudi Arabia is of paramount importance, that it has been given a serious priority. We are also enabled with the right wherewithals and the right enablers and the right institutions. We also we have a leadership that do value sustainability. And also, because we are the host of the G20, we wanted to make sure that we use this platform to invigorate more attendance to what we are trying to do for ourselves, and being a member of the global scene, that we are working with others, prominent others, to ensure that we all move and direct our resources towards common objectives, common goals, common programs. We are vigorously moving within the G20 concept, which is called the CCE, which is the Circular Carbon Economy, which bring a lot of goodies to the people, like the guest of this event just a while ago, Dr. Jane Goodwin, who is more concerned about the environment, and also bring growth, bring use and efficient use of resources, which is also good, an enabler for maintaining our sustainability. And it also mitigates environmental issues. We believe that CCE would be an excellent solution to attend to all of these concerns of how we can bring growth, how we bring economic prosperity, how we can mitigate the issue of energy poverty, how we can enable people to have, the 2.6 billion people that do not have a mean to cook with any fuel, and they do use biomass, how we can bring electricity to the 850 million people that they are devoid of any electricity. These are challenges. How can we attend to the issue of plastic and make plastic more usable, in fact, and mitigate the use of wood as a way for packaging, because we believe that reuse plastics is much more economical and actually more environmentally sustainable than having to cut trees and do damage to forestry and what have you. These are common challenges. What we are as Saudi Arabia, we're trying to lead by example. We have a serious efficiency program. We have a serious program when it comes to our own domestic consumption of electricity. In 2030, we will be using 50% of our electricity will come from renewables, and we're putting our money where our mouth is. We will be very soon announcing a project on solar that will take the lead in terms of the lowest, probably the lowest, if not, I'm sure it will be the lowest cost of per kilowatt of electricity. We will be announcing it very soon. So we are not only producing electricity from solar, we are taking record numbers and we're making records, and we are willing to compete with a lot of people that would claim that they will do it better than it. Could you believe it? Saudi Arabia has a wind electricity, and we will be expanding on that. 50% of our electricity will come from renewables, 50% will come from hydrocarbon, but with gas. It will be the most efficient power sector in the whole world, and I'm willing to lay money on that. We have the most serious, most effective efficiency program, which led the IEA to ask us to come and demonstrate it to many of these countries. We will have a more price reform program that would enable us to bring this energy sector to at a level playing field with the various energy sectors across the world. So our competitiveness will be even seriously improved because we are pushing in terms of efficiencies at all levels, efficiencies of cost, efficiency of how we use our energy, efficiency of how we can even use our resource itself as a hydrocarbon. Again, we have a record to show to the world that we can compete with any oil company in the world in terms of what we do with our methane and how we are sequestering methane and making it into a good use. And I think two of our panelists will be able to share a few. But these are few things that by the way, with regard to the G20, we have two serious initiatives. One, which has to do with mitigation, which is increasing greenery and forestry in the world, and we would be the first to commit ourselves to. And one which has to do with adaptation, which is how to improve the coral on the seabeds. And again, we will be the first to commit ourselves to. It just so happened that these two programs correlate well with what I was saying, the CCE, which is the carbon sequestration, the carbon circular carbon economy, which again looks for all the choices and all the alternatives to ensure that we use energy in the most economical, sustainable way possible.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's broaden out the discussion then and invite our other two speakers to join us. We have Mr. Mukesh Ambani, who is the Chairman and Managing Director of Reliance Industries, joining us. Now, Reliance is interesting, very interesting in this context because, of course, in of itself, it is a diversified company. It is India's largest private sector enterprise. And as I said, Mr. Ambani is the Chairman and Managing Director of Reliance Industries. We also have Mr. Patrick Pouyanné, who is the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Total SA in France. Patrick, if I may, I'd like to start with you and ask you about the If I can, Patrick, start with you and ask you about this net zero carbon target. What does it mean, and what is it? Does it matter if oil companies, having committed themselves to this, uncommit themselves to it?
Good afternoon, everybody, and good afternoon, the wider audience. I'm happy to meet you again through the screen. And it has been very busy last 3 months, to be honest, for everybody in the oil and gas industry. But I must say that we've done quite well the last 2 months. So I would like to answer to your question because you are right, Tanya. We have just announced our commitment to climate neutrality beginning of May in the middle of the crisis. I would say we have announced it because it's fully in line with our strategy. And what is the strategy of the company? Is to be aligned, to be in phase with the evolution of the energy markets. The climate change and the dual challenge that we are all facing is on one side that we need to bring more affordable energy to everybody on the planet, and on the other side we need less carbon emissions. This is a dual challenge, which means that the energy markets will evolve in the future if they want to cope with both more energy, more affordable energy, but less carbon. So that means that there are trends, and you cannot fight about these trends because new technologies are there, because the society is willing as well, and you have some policies, regulations which are put in place in different parts of the world in order to push towards the ultimate challenge, which is to fight against the climate change. So what does that mean, in fact, for a company like Total? It means that we are today producing mainly oil and gas, of course, which are, in fact, the core of all the energy world markets. But tomorrow, we will have new energies, and in particular, the economy will be more electrified, I would say. So when you look to the energy market, electricity will grow by far more than the other source of energy. And so we have decided to engage, to develop the company in this, exactly like Saudi Arabia, in this low carbon electricity business. Low carbon electricity means renewables and natural gas, power the gas-fired power plant. And so we will, in fact, change our business model step by step from an oil and gas company to a broad energy company, a multi-energy company, producing, of course, oil, but mainly, I would say, and oil must be driven by low-cost oil, because in this new energy market, the world will probably will see a plateau of oil production. So we need to take care of the cost of production of oil, like in Saudi Arabia. We'll promote natural gas, because obviously natural gas is a good energy transition to go from the actual world to the new world. And we will develop as well in renewable energy, low carbon electricity, as I said. Last piece of the puzzle will be to invest in what we call negative technologies in terms of capturing CO2, either by nature-based solutions or by carbon capture and storage. And so we will not do it again, this carbon neutrality, alone with this carbon neutrality. We have a strategy. We'll be able to achieve it together with the society, because obviously it's partly embarking of customers. When you change your supply mix, it will work to go to carbon neutrality only if the customers are following us. So we need to convince them, which means also to deliver again some affordable energy to them with new source of energy. And that's a big challenge that we will face.
Thank you very much. We'll come back to this issue also of investors if we may. But first, Mr. Ambani, if I can come to Mukesh Ambani. And I've introduced Reliance as being a diversified company. So obviously the parameters are slightly different for you. How do you see this challenge put up by the oil majors of becoming a net zero carbon?
Thank you, Tanya, and greetings to everybody. Your Royal Highness, it's a privilege and pleasure to be with you on this panel. The way I see it is that in the progress that humankind has made over the 3 industrial revolutions, we have disturbed the carbon cycle. We have, and now it is time to use technologies, as His Royal Highness said, and Patrick said, to reset that balance and adopt the carbon cycle. Right? It's not only imperative for us to be net carbon zero, but I think that we have to recycle carbon. I believe that Mother Nature is the best technology that no humankind can ever do, and she teaches us how to recycle. Last 150 years, we've forgotten the carbon cycle. His Highness reminded us about that, and I think that Saudi Arabia in the G20 summit is putting this on the global agenda. We have to adopt technologies, and I think that for us in the energy business, it is not so much about decarbonization, but it is really about really completing the cycle. And I think that renewable or clean fuels, right? I think about the business as a very simple framework, and energy is an essential requirement for all the 8 billion people on this earth. Uh, there is need to provide efficient, clean, affordable energy, uh, and we have to do it in a responsible way. That's the business. We shouldn't confuse that between clean and unclean. I think that where we are, if we take a clean sheet of paper, we can adopt technologies whereby we can complete the uh, energy cycle. We can adopt new technologies, particularly of the biochemical photosynthesis route, whereby we can, instead of treating carbon dioxide as a liability, we can make that as a raw material. There are new progresses in uh, the electrochemical routes, in the catalytic routes, whereby we can still complete the carbon cycle. I don't think that just one solution will fit all. The important thing also is to allow energy equity. That means if you everybody has to have access to clean energy for their quality of life at an affordable price. And the challenge for industry, and I am again a big believer that the challenge for industry and the purpose of industry is prosperity of all people, that is supply of energy on an affordable basis, is prosperity of the planet. And only after these two can there be prosperity for the companies or the shareholders. And I think with where we are today, in the coming decades, we have no choice but to meet these challenges, to complete the carbon cycle, and serve the energy needs of all its customers, rather than thinking in terms of fossil and renewable and wind and solar.
Patrick, very briefly, if I could just come back to you and ask you this question. It seems that customers are very on board, consumers are very on board. What about investors? What about investors, and are they going to see production of oil somehow falling off after 2050? What will happen to oil production, and how will investors see that? Just briefly, if you would.
But I think, it's not a black and white story. Even in 2050, they will still produce some oil in all the scenarios, even in the 1.5 degree scenario. In fact. Maybe only half of today, but Saudi Arabia is safe, don't worry. This oil of Saudi Arabia will be continued to be produced because it's the lowest cost, the best oil, the lowest cost one. So, I mean, it's not, investors, today, there are different camps of investors. And it depends where you are in the world. In Europe, of course, you have a strong push of society, and my European shareholders are very pushing us to go towards this low carbon economy. And you can observe that today, all these green companies, by the way, because of scarcity, are really have incredible multiples, but mainly because of scarcity. You don't have many really green companies, renewable companies. On the other side of the Atlantic, when I'm discussing with my US shareholders, it's mixed, because these guys, they know that maybe because the US are also a large oil and gas country, more than in Europe. But so the investors are not exactly, it depends on the culture, I would say, in the continent. Europe is at the forefront of this fight. The European society is embarking in the Green Deal. And by the way, for a company like Total, it can give us some opportunities. If really, like it is the case, Europe is embarking in the hydrogen economy, like they want to do it. I see that as an opportunity to engage also my company in this hydrogen business and maybe to take some advance compared to other competitors. But again, the real roadmap, the real challenge for us is to find the right pace towards this neutrality. Because on one side we are pushed to go very quick, and on the other side we know but investing in energy requires billions of dollars. And we need to continue to produce oil to get billions of dollars in order to reinvest in this new energy. There is no miracle there. We cannot just borrow money coming from nowhere, like it seems possible during the pandemic. And so that's also a virtuous circle that we want to put in place. We have the conviction that in Total, we have a clear roadmap, which means that the next step is to, in 2030, to produce 15% of green electrons in our portfolio, 15.5. Today it's less than 5%. To continue to produce 45% of oil and 40% of gas. And to do that, we need to invest each year or between $2 billion these years and maybe $2 to $3 billion in these green electrons, you know. And the rest of the investments will continue to be focused on natural gas and oil in the company. So there is a possible roadmap, continuing also to give some returns to our stakeholders, to our shareholders. So that's of course, to do that, to be honest, I prefer OPEC to stick to its current policy and to have $40 plus than to be at $20 per barrel, because there it will be tough. So obviously it's easier, but I think it's, by the way, the message is good for, even if we want to really believe in climate change, it's better to have a higher oil price for everybody than a price which will be too low, because then the people will be lazy, and you know, the lowest energy and the most efficient one will be oil. So I think for climate change, it's even better for everybody to have a higher price, and 40 plus is better for everybody.
Right, we're running out of time, so I'd like to come back to Your Royal Highness and ask this, you've touched on it before, but this backdrop of COVID-19, what does it do you think, to oil companies' ambitions to move ahead in this direction? What does it do to, has it jump-started the process, or will it act as a drag, do you think, Your Royal Highness?
No, I see it that it is a virus, but I see it is a challenging virus, because it just brings a serious bill that we, the whole world, should adapt to the idea of working together to mitigate viral diseases and spend more and allocate more money on healthcare programs to ensure that whatever we went through in the first episode of the first 2 months should not be repeated globally. But I believe the challenge is more of a medical. However, since this medical situation hampered and really reduced the will of people to overcome the economic impact of it, because again, I cannot recall even in any period of history that this world economy has ever been impacted in such a way, or affected in such a way, or is challenged in such a way. But and I believe that, you know, we should not, even if we mitigate it and it's all quiet in the Western Front, that we just cheer it and then move on, because I believe that this virus has its own sirens of wanting from the whole world to be attentive to viral diseases and attend to it properly. Be it as it may, I guess that what this situation also created as a challenge, additional challenge, is that people need not to take things for granted, and people need to be careful about the trajectory of the future in case if they get to be misled by the existing of today's number and how they see these trajectories. Patrick and they see a lot of economists, and they tell me all these nice, fancy, progressive growth and none of them just shows us what would happen to a crisis, of natural crisis or medical crisis as such would do, and how people can be ready to mitigate it. Without that, I think that sense of readiness would not be there. And therefore, I believe that what this thing had done for everybody is, I think, that the hardest and toughest lesson that is learned is that let us not take things for granted. There are all sorts of things that could happen to the world that can sway us to be much more prudent and careful and cautious on how we attend to the future.
Mr. Ambani, just very briefly, if you would, what about PIF partnership and how you engage outside the company in order to make this happen?
Well, I think that for us, particularly in India, we have a high growth rate of energy. So it is important that one works with consumers and one is spreading awareness. This virus itself has helped everybody realize the benefit of the low carbon mindset. So we engage outside, and I think real touch with the community, understanding the community on the ground level, and understanding different sectors of the economy and getting them involved in the energy movement is critical for having a part to restore the carbon cycle.
Your Royal Highness, what will happen to oil production after 2050? It's a question I put to Patrick earlier on, and it's a question that we've had coming in as well from Kola Kareem, the CEO of Shoreline Energy International. Is there a short answer to that question?
You know, I'm very grateful for the question. You know, I wish you were with us today this morning. I was working with a breed of young Saudi, working on a program, we call it Hydrocarbon Sustainability Program, which is, I believe even Total is involved with us in that program, which is how to make sure that we use our molecules of hydrocarbon and put it to good use in an environmentally safe way, commensurate with what the world would be in the future. I can assure you Saudi Arabia will be not only the last producer, but Saudi Arabia would produce every molecule of hydrocarbon, and it would put it to good use, and it will be done in a most environmentally safe and sound way, and it's the more sustainable way. And we love challenges. And I love the idea of being challenged. And I love the idea that I have a young crowd who live a life of challenging life. You know, I think we in Saudi Arabia are just gone beyond the so-called political correctness or social correctness to one of saying, no, there is a challenge for us. We would have to live up to that challenge, which is we are sitting on a huge amount of hydrocarbon. We'll make better use of it. We have a serious program on how to convert oil and gas to chemicals. Where we can go beyond that of primary chemical to secondary and tertiary, and we go all the way to the even, today as we speak, we just realized as a result of COVID, and I'm sorry to take much of your time, that we have the ability to produce all the 9 N95s. We haven't done that. We're doing it right now. All the PPEs, because we have the right
ingredient. The N95 is the mask.
Yeah, the PPEs, we will be producing it. We are now producing sanitizers. Just it takes discipline and a committed people. You should come and see the young men and young boys and girls of Saudi Arabia, how much they aspire to be challenged and how much they are inspired to attend to these challenges. And the kind of enablers and the kind of that are in existence today is one that enables them to say, I can reach out to these goals. So we will be setting the pace. I know that Patrick and Mukesh, they know us well. Not only that, we would live to that challenge, which is we will be the pace setters. So in 2050, I would not be there, but I'm willing to tape something to say we will be the last and biggest producer of hydrocarbon even then.
Thank you very much indeed, Your Royal Highness. I'd also like to thank Mr. Patrick Poyani of Total and Mr. Mukesh Ambani of Reliance Industries. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome CEO of Tamach Advisory, His Excellency, Dr. Bassem Abdallah.
Thank you very much. Longer depends on the nature of national policies and measures to stimulate recovery, but rather requires a coordinated and bold response and global goals and plans that respond to the post-epidemic world, ensuring the minimum level of harmony and consistency between national policies and objectives on the one hand and global plans on the other. We must think both locally and globally. Indeed, future-proofing sustainable recovery and sustainable development is only possible when sound environmental responses, plans, and policies are given the importance they deserve at both the global and national levels. Global problems require global collaboration and response. We need to work together as an international community, since emissions and pollutants are cross-border and they do not recognize geography. I would also like to add that with the expectation of a significant increase in the debt burden of most developing countries, it is unlikely that these countries will be able to give priority to the green economy. What we need is a global initiative, like the one that was suggested by the current G20 presidency, Saudi Arabia, to support the developing countries' efforts to face their financial crises and encourage them to adopt policies, legislation, and incentive systems that emphasize sustainable development. To elaborate on these points, we have with us today a very distinguished panel of decision makers, experts, and scientists. Allow me to first introduce Her Excellency Madame Brune Poisson, Minister of State, attached to the Minister for the Ecological and Inclusive Transition in France, Lord Adair Turner, Chairman of the Energy Transitions Commission and Senior Fellow at the Institute of New Economic Thinking of the United Kingdom, Mr. Jay Collins, Vice Chairman, Banking, Capital Markets and Advisor of Citibank in the United States of America, and last but certainly not least, Dr. Mario Molina, the 1995 Nobel Laureate in Chemistry and President of the Mario Molina Center in Mexico. Madame la Ministre, your country, France, is one of the countries leading the sustainable recovery effort in the EU and actually globally, and the country behind the One Planet Summit. So you are really uniquely qualified to tell us why should a sustainable recovery be an imperative for governments?
Thank you very much, and good morning or good evening to all of you. First of all, allow me to thank you for organizing this event. Thank you also for really putting emphasis on the key topic of a green recovery. If I understand well your question, Your Excellency, I think the question you've asked is really how to make the current crisis an opportunity to build a better future. One thing I'm pretty sure of, and this is what I feel from a lot of the French people also, and even European citizens, is that clearly the COVID-19 crisis has really challenged a lot of the certainties that we had. And the wake-up call is actually brutal. We must now, there's no other, we don't have any other, I mean, there's no other option but to accept that we need to change. Because one thing is certain, and this is clearly something that citizens keep asking for, is that we can never go back to the way things were. Saying that doesn't mean that we know exactly where to go, how to go, and what do citizens want to leave back. But one thing that we know is that if we look at past crisis, I think this crisis is closer to it's closer to where we were in 1945 than what happened in 2008 or in the 70s. So I think what we need is really, and I don't want to sound over dramatic, but frankly speaking, I think this is the closest comparisons to what I think we need is really a green Marshall Plan. I think we need a Marshall Plan of the 21st century. I think obviously the context is very different. So we need a Marshall Plan that is way bigger than the original Marshall Plan, which was only $130 billion at the time, which is huge. But we need more actually if we want to make a change towards a greener economy. I think we need the Marshall Plan, which is also broader. So that goes really to scale. We need a Marshall Plan which is more inclusive, both in terms of taking into account the social inequalities, but also inequalities between countries. And fourth, one of the key differences with 1945 is the fact that private companies are really on board and are really not only willing, but have a lot of the solutions. So we need to come up with a new type of partnerships, public-private partnerships, using public money in a different way to attract more private capital, using sort of blended finance way more. So I think this is what we need. This is for the global level. At the national level, the recovery plans must also reflect the green ambition. Green investments are the solutions if we are to make our economies more resilient, but also less exposed to external disasters. It will create more local jobs, but not only more local jobs, but also jobs that are less risky. Because if we are to support the same job as before, these jobs are going to be under threat. So we need to make sure that we invest in the right type of companies, jobs, and sector of the economy. I think one of the key ways of doing that is that focusing on investments that follow actions through a mix of eco-conditions and eco-incentives. For example, we should support decarbonation, in particular in the field of sustainable mobility, low carbon energy, building renovation, or economic breakthrough. Second, we need to invest way more in circular economy solutions. I think circular economy is absolutely key for sovereignty, industrial sovereignty, for job creation, and for the preservation of the environment. And third, I should also focus on an industrial strategy that focuses and bring together the ecological, but also and the digital transition. I think this is really the way to go. This is at least how in France we view things and how we have organized recovery plans at the national level, but also at the European level, and how we view things at the global level.
I think you can see this is very useful. And to pick up on what you said, let me just go to Lord Adair Turner and ask you, from the point of view of investors and companies, Lord Turner, what is the investment case for the sustainable recovery? And what opportunities does it represent for these investors and for these companies?
Well, thank you. Let me make 4 points which set the context for that. First, within my Energy Transition Commission, we're absolutely convinced that the whole world has got to aim to get to net zero emissions by 2050. But the good news is that in terms of technologically, how do you get there? It actually in the world from 25,000 terawatt hours to 90,000. But the good news is that we
Lord
now
Turner,
know how to do that.
Can I interrupt you for a second? Lord Turner,
Yes.
I think we lost you for about 1 minute. Could you just recap what you just mentioned? We lost the audio. I'm sorry about this.
Did you miss it right from the beginning?
No.
Please,
From
if
your
you
4
could
points.
go back to the beginning. I would appreciate that.
Okay. What I wanted to say was, and I don't know how you indicate to me if it cuts off again, that there
I'll
are
just raise my hand.
Okay, fine. 4 key points. First, in the Energy Transition Commission, we are absolutely clear that we have to get to net zero emissions by 2050. Second, that we know how to do that the absolute core of any path to net zero, and therefore that informs what investors should be looking for, is the deep electrification of the economy. It's taking electricity from something like 25% of final energy demand today to 65% by 2050, with fossil fuels declining in that role equally dramatically. An increase in total electricity use across the world of 4 to 5 times. But the good news is that that is now possible far more cheaply than we dared hope just 10 years ago because of the dramatic falls that have occurred, and we saw them earlier on the screen, in the cost.
I think we've lost you
Can you
again,
hear me
Lord
now?
Turner. Yes, I can hear you. Can you just recap yeah, you said that we saw them on the screen and the cost. You were talking about the cost. So you can start from there if you want.
The costs of producing wind or solar have dramatically reduced. Solar costs down by 85%, wind costs down by maybe 60%, battery costs down by 85%. And all that means that actually achieving is absolutely possible, and possible across the world. But the tragedy is at the moment, we're not on a path to that at all. We are on a path to 3 degrees warming rather than 1.5. And that's because we're just not going fast enough. These technological trends are so powerful that I'm actually pretty confident that by 2100, even if we didn't have strong policies, we would have a zero carbon economy, but it would be 50 years too late. And we've got to use policy to accelerate the path. So coming out of the COVID-19 crisis, I think we've got to really use this as an opportunity to dramatically accelerate that pace of progress. And I would identify 3 crucial things. One, and I think that relates to Madame Nisla's point,
I think we're losing you. It's probably your Wi-Fi, Lord Turner. It's playing with the audio. Can you briefly just conclude with the 3 points, please?
3 points. Massive investment in green electrification. That's the strategic long-term necessity. Strong investment in buildings and energy efficiency, because that's the thing that can create large amounts of jobs in the short term in the response to this crisis. And thirdly, investment in the key technologies we need for the future, which include electric vehicles, electrolysis of hydrogen, batteries, and a digital economy. So those are my 3 priorities.
Well said. Thank you very much. Mr. J. Collins, what do we need to do differently in order to sustainably recover? What should the private sector investors and the governments do better, collectively, together, to make this recovery sustainable?
Great, thank you. Well, let me build off on the Minister and Lord Turner's comments a little, both without repeating them, just reinforcing what they said, and particularly Lord Turner talked about tragedy, and Minister talked about the Marshall Plan, which I think is a great idea. You know, it's that boldness, it's the seizing the moment and the action of this crisis. Historically, we haven't done that well. You know, Michelle Walker wrote a book called The Gray Rhino, where she talks about how humanity tends to neglect these highly probable, highly impactful global threats. Even like with the gray rhino, when they're staring us in the face. And we just can't do that again with climate change. We can't do that with the social inequality threats that we're facing. I just reread Mark Carney's comments, Lord Turner. You mentioned this tragedy, but the tragedy of commons speech that he gave on climate change and short-termism. And quite frankly, how humanity tends to postpone through inaction today and place on future generations enormous challenges due to how we think about economic and political paradigms that are too short-term and in our face. So this long-termism will be absolutely critical as a context. And you know, this tragedy concept that to steal from Churchill, it's important to define the tragedy or the potential peril, but it's also, as Churchill did, defining the hope and the aspiration of where we're going, the promise, if you will. And without that, we don't get there. And so this path to more sustainable recovery is going to require both this bold action and a roadmap and an ambition. And the only way we're going to get there, like the defiance and resolve that Churchill showed, and again, the minister talked about the 1945 comparison, right? That is the challenge of the moment, to be unafraid to call a spade, to pivot, even if the SDGs are now seemingly further out and out of our range and the ability to fund, to be more ambitious actually now in our aim. It will require extraordinary public-private partnerships of the likes that we've really only seen in war times. And we've lost the flavor of the multilateralism, and we've also not done what we can do in the paradigms of public-private partnerships. And to recreate those in ways that allow the private sector to do what it wants to do. Let me give a couple examples. So one of the things that is tragic in what we're seeing right now with this $30 trillion of investor capital that is searching for a home in the ESG space to put money to work is this cacophony, if you will, of performance metrics and sustainability data. The data is inconsistent, it's outdated, it generally lacks transparency. We don't have harmonized metrics around the world. In fact, there's a failure, quite frankly, of the global system across the board, rating agencies, ESG scores, governments, standard setting bodies, and regulators to come together around common energy transition taxonomies, standardizing some of these scoring frameworks. And by the way, that may be done best by the scoring setters themselves without the regulators. but it's not harmonized. We don't have comparable and mandatory disclosure frameworks, and we certainly don't have shared KPIs to measure both financial and non-financial metrics that are consistent globally. So if you think of all these investors on the one side and the needs on the other, we have this metrics data wall between us that unless we solve that together as an ecosystem, we won't do what is my second point, which is we have to scale at speed trillions of dollars of funding to get this right. And the only way we're going to do that is to harness the capital markets. The capital markets have the size to go from that old Dr. Kim adage of billions to trillions. And in particular, as I think Lord Turner and others mentioned, this need to grab and harness the technology that is actually wind at our back. It is possible to invest at scale in some of the technologies in the sustainability space. We just have to do it at speed. And in the case of climate, with an eye to Paris aligned investment scopes. In the EM world, it's trickier. And one of the speakers mentioned the blended finance option. I think we should be appalled at how slow blended finance has really been scaled and utilized, particularly where the ESG investor tends to start with the developed world, with investment grade space. And with the tragic situation of debt and growth and sustainability in most of the deeper, poorest emerging markets countries, we're going to have to blend, meaning we're going to have to bring in grant and development funding into structures with the private sector to be able to mitigate some of the risk. Without that, and without those structures scaled, the private sector can't be expected and won't take the risk where it's often needed most. The private sector can, with the right catalyst and risk mitigation structures like blended finance, actually do more, actually participate, and actually contribute. Citi is working now with the Secretary General on the Global Investors for Sustainability Alliance. It's a group of 30 investors and corporations around the world that the Secretary General chairs at the CEO level, dedicated to accelerate the sustainable finance alternatives. And one of the things that's happened is it's a group of, say, $15 trillion of investment money, is as we've come together now to consult with the European Commission as they move forward with their European renewable finance objectives. That's an example, one concrete example of public-private partnership. Why? You take these global investors and consult with the European Commission in a way that allows for a balance between how to get the private sector there and what are the appropriate policy and regulatory frameworks that will get us there, whether it's brown taxonomy and the energy transition slope, whether it's mandatory disclosures, all of those things that will allow us to maintain the Paris objectives, but also do it in a way that is principle regulatory based and incentivizes the private sector to do the right thing. That type of collaboration is critical. And if we don't have more of that, again, I just leave you with this thought. You can have the best orchestra, instruments, and players in the world. And if you don't have a conductor, if you don't play together on the same sheet of music with the same timing, you just won't get there. And so unless we stop siloing and we start to orchestrate and integrate a lot of the extraordinary efforts that are being done, and we start to collaborate better between the public and private sectors, we just won't do this. But the hope is that is absolutely within our power, and we can do it.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Dr. Molina, I need to excuse myself just for a minute because I'm told that Madame la Ministre, she needs to go to the Élysée Palace. So we need to ask her one last question before she leaves us, if you don't mind. Madame la Ministre, what is the role, picking up on what Mr. Collins said, what is the role of key platforms? Is multilateralism dead, or do we have still a use for key platforms like the upcoming G20 the COP26, the One Planet Summit? Can they encourage ambition? Can they coordinate this global recovery effort?
Thank you very much. First of all my apologies, because what I've been hearing from the speakers is I've been taking a lot of notes. It's fascinating. So I really apologize for having to leave the room. It's extremely rude. But thank you again for your question. So whether I think that multilateralism is still relevant, very much so. Whether the way it works is still relevant, I doubt it. I don't think that we need to sort of change all our global institutions. That's not what I mean. But I just mean that we need a multilateralism that actually delivers for people. Very often, it sounds very obvious, but you know, I'm elected in the south of France, and when I go back to my constituency, I always really struggle to explain why did I go to New York? Like, how did it make their life different? I'm being a bit like, you know, I'm being a bit over, you know, provocative here. But frankly speaking, I think we need to change the way we work at the global level. And I think it can go along the lines of exactly what Mr. Collins has just said. We need to come up with new ways of collaborating. One of the things that is really, really obvious and that really strikes me is that over the past decades, we have been extremely bad at collaborating. So now what we need is extreme forms of collaboration. So blended finance is one, but it is also, it could be used. I'm not going to get into the, you know, peace building and because this is too far from what we're working on and talking about right now. But I think this is the types of extreme collaborations that we need. We also need, I think, to find a way of rethinking, and I know this is huge, and I know this is almost a taboo, but I think we also need to rethink the IP system, because at some point we will need to share new technologies and what is behind. So what sort of platforms, how do we collaborate to make sure that private companies can still have the return on the massive investments that they've made in innovation, while at the same time sharing more broadly and with poorer countries the innovation that they have come up with. And so what we're trying to do with the One Planet Summit that President Macron came up is really to identify critical sectors of the economy where through different forms of collaboration, we can actually have an entire system or an entire sector of the economy actually just get to a tipping point and get into sustainable development. Just to give you an example, it's going to sound very trivial, but for example, the fashion industry. So you're going to say, why the hell is she talking about fashion? You know, is it because she's a woman? No, the fashion industry is the second largest polluting industry in the world. Everywhere in the world, it is actually destroying nature. There is no other word. No other word. Destroying nature. So what are the instruments? How do we work with private companies? What is the role of the private sector? How do we bring together at least 25 to 30% of the private companies of a particular, of the fashion industry, of the fashion world, to actually join a coalition where they make commitments, where they commit to doing more? And so this is what we've done. We've brought 30% of the industry to actually make ambitious commitments to reduce pollution, to invest also in nature-based solutions. And because what we've seen is that if we get 25 to 30% of the sector of the economy, then the entire sector actually can become more sustainable. Because what it means is that the 70% who haven't joined the movement towards a more sustainable and more ambitious in terms of sustainable development, we can actually finger point them, saying, hey, you're not doing your homework, you're not doing enough. And the remaining 30%, we can actually use them to show to other countries around the world that actually now is the time to regulate. That way, we go faster than through traditional diplomatic ways of working. It can be, it's the same on plastics, the same on green, on a whole set of green technologies. Anyway, I don't want to be too long. I think I spent way too much time on the fashion industry, which was absolutely not my objective. But I just wanted to make it a point and show that we are actually currently working through the One Planet Summit and the One Planet Lab on concrete ways of changing the way we work at the global level, because we need to show concrete changes in people's lives. Otherwise, they will stop tolerating all these big international institutions that actually fail to deliver for people.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your very valuable contribution. I hope that we will see you in Riyadh in October when you can elaborate more on the Marshall Plan and on what you just said. You can be the best conductor that Mr. Collins suggested. Thank you very much. Good luck to you. Dr. Molina, if I may turn to you. You are one of the leading figures behind the effort to close the ozone hole, one of the global environmental successes of the 20th century. What are the lessons learned from that success? What do they mean for how we should deal with the climate change challenge?
Well, I would say the main success story is that the problem, excuse me, the problem with stratospheric ozone is a global problem. It doesn't matter which country is emitting the industrial substances that affect it, because they get mixed in the atmosphere. And that's what happens also with climate change. That's a very big challenge that we have. It is a global problem. It doesn't matter where you make the emissions, it affects the climate of the entire planet. But the very important point of the stratospheric ozone layer is that we do have one example that did work very well. The countries of the world got together, and of course they had to negotiate and do all sorts of things. But eventually, through the Montreal Protocol, all the countries in the planet agreed to solve the problem. And that actually happened in spite of there being big differences, the rich countries emitting a lot more and so on. They even came up with a financial solution to help developing countries to participate in this accord. And it's working very well. It's just that these chemicals, we're still seeing the effects of those emitted in the 20th century. But it's very clear that the problem is practically solved. There are a few imperfections that are being found and so on. But the big difference is that for the stratospheric ozone problem, we only had a few very large industries, maybe 5 or 6 large chemical industries. At the beginning, they, of course, didn't want to participate, but we were able to work to be part of the solution. And so that's what we are listening now. We need to do the same thing with the climate issue, except that, of course, fossil fuels is a much broader component of the economy than used to be the case for the fluorocarbons, the gases that affect the ozone layer. But I am optimistic because we do have this one successful example that the countries of the planet can get together. Now, just mention 2 things, if I may, briefly. There have been many meetings through the United Nations, as you know, UNFCCC and so on, to see how to deal with the climate issue. Fortunately, after many years, the Paris Accord was successful. So that means we do have a global agreement. It's just not good enough to solve the problem. The second point I want to make, if I can leave it on here on the table, is that in the scientific community, I belong to this community who work with Europeans, with Americans, with Latin Americans, anyhow. But the consensus a few years ago was that we had underestimated the impacts of that society would feel from not dealing with climate change. And that's why, starting something like 2 years ago, we decided to declare a climate emergency. So we're no longer in the same world we were talking about a decade ago. We are now in an emergency situation. I agree, Lord Turner already mentioned one of the goals is by 2050, not to have any more emissions of greenhouse gases. That's a very demanding aspect of this climate emergency that we have. And that means that we no longer have many decades. The goal is just in one more decade, by 2030, to have reached the maximum in emissions and then to start decreasing them. And the point is, just to summarize, is that fortunately with the technologies the way they have developed, we can do it. It's possible to boost the economies of the entire planet, to try to deal with the poor countries, which is a very big challenge. And because with the new technologies, it can be done without doing economic sacrifices. That's very important. But we're not there yet. We have the sustainable energies. Yeah. But anyhow, we still have a lot of work that we need to do.
Thank you very much. We have a short video. We have a short video to play where two young people will ask a question each. Can we please play the video and then I'll come back to the panel.
Due to COVID-19, we have seen a recent drop in global oil prices. This is an opportunity to revisit the policies, promote enabling technologies, and build financial arms to redirect resources to move away from fossil-fueled economy towards more greener economy. Now, what supportive policies will you put in place to mobilize the green grassroots micro-enterprises, especially in the green transportation sector that has been hard hit because of the pandemic?
Around the world, youth climate movements have joined the global call for racial justice. We know that Black, Indigenous, and peoples of color are disproportionately affected by the climate and biodiversity emergency. And since there can be no climate justice without racial justice, what will you do to advance environmental and digital solutions that center racial equity?
These are the questions from two of the youth, global youth. I just want to go back to the panelists, each one, for just one sentence, if I may, because we are running out of time. What would you advise the upcoming G20 summit in November in Saudi Arabia about the recovery, the green recovery? What would be your one in Riyadh in November? Lord Turner?
Commit to net zero emissions by 2050 and invest as heavily as we can across the world in electrification of our economy and zero carbon electrification of the economy. That's the vision that we have to have.
Thank you. Dr. Molina.
I agree with Lord Turner on this. I would add that society must consider measures such as putting a price on emissions, putting a price on carbon emissions as a practical means to really force all the different countries to comply, because that it's feasible. The idea is to let each country decide how to deal with it and so on. But at the moment, these are externalities where it's the cost to society of letting climate change impact us is much larger than the cost to the economy if we do it properly.
Thank you, Professor. Mr. Collins, what would be your advice?
So first and foremost, I already gave it, which is that globally we have to have harmonized standards, metrics, disclosures, and while every country rowing their own boat in different directions just isn't going to get us there. And the G20 has to provide some of that leadership, whether it's one global standard setting body, whether it's the coordination frameworks that take the discord out of that system. Absolutely critical that that there is a more coordinated, harmonized approach, and that we get to this, what was said before, a price for carbon, that we have a net zero objective and a energy transition process toward Paris. And finally, one of the questions that was so aptly asked by the students in terms of measuring sustainability, not just green. Let's go back to the SDGs, dust off the sustainability ambition, and embrace, as the question implied, the digital surge that has happened through this COVID crisis to put technology to work all the way down to the last mile to deal with some of these inequalities. Technology can close the funding gap. It can speed the time to impact of the sustainability goals, and with the right framework around it, so that it's used appropriately, it can be funded to scale with great purpose and impact.
This has been an exceptional panel. Thank you so much for your contribution, for your thoughts, and for your advice. Thank you once again.
No, thank you.
It is now my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Jacques Attali, economist, author, and president of Positive Planet in France, for a one-on-one conversation.
I'm delighted
Hello,
to be with you.
Mr. Attali, how are you, Excellency?
Hello, Bassam.
So good to see you.
Very nice to see you again, Bassam.
I hope you have been following the panel and listening to what the exceptional panelists have had to say.
It was fascinating.
What is your reaction to the issues discussed in the previous panel?
Well, it's fascinating, and many very interesting suggestions have been made. It's clear that we need to go to zero emission before 2050, if possible. I would have been happy if we have spoken more on circular energy, as it has been said, circular economy, as His Royal Highness did before. If we could have discussed more on the importance of nuclear energy, which I think is a must, we cannot avoid it, and it's really something very significant. And also on the fact that the first thing we need to get rid of is coal. I'm sure that if the world agreed, and I'm sure it's impossible, that we get rid of all coal used around the world, then the goal of 2-degree increase of temperature in the world will be reachable. But of course, we need to replace coal by clean energy. Will it be nuclear, or will it be power, or whatever? But this is something that I was just willing to add to what had been said before. The rest was fascinating and very interesting.
Thank you very much. But how do we create
and
this
I would also we have to do that, unfortunately, through a shock. If you look at what mankind is doing, mankind is very blind. We don't like to move if we are not forced to do it. We are facing the largest economic crisis of mankind history now, as we speak, worldwide. We are putting $12 trillion on the table, as it has been said yesterday by IMF. But we don't do it to change it. We do it just to survive as it is. 12 trillion are a technique of procrastination, not of change. And then it's a very sad lesson that even with a huge, enormous crisis, we only do trying to survive the economy as it is, not to use this opportunity to change. I think this crisis is a huge opportunity to organize the change. It's a little bit strange to speak about climate change now because it's not the main important challenge. The most urgent challenge is COVID and pandemics. And COVID is just one pandemic before some others. But there is a link between, as it has been said by many people before me, between the pandemics and the crisis of climate. One is that the fact that we should realize that climate change is a long process, while the COVID is a very brutal one. And then we have more time to adjust to the climate change, but we had time to adjust to the COVID. And then we can use this crisis to move in the direction of what I call economy of life, which means the most important sectors to be developed in order both to get rid of potential comeback of a pandemic or other pandemics. And I'm sure this will be one of the key issues of the next G20, which is under the responsibility and the wonderful chair of the kingdom, which has to address this question, how to get to avoid the coming back of a pandemic and of next pandemics. And to use that also as an opportunity to move in the directions of economy of life, which means the sectors that will both prevent the coming back of pandemics or next pandemics and the coming of another kind of pandemics, which is the climate pandemic. First, because the climate is creating more mosquitoes, which are creating pandemics. And the second, because the climate is a kind of pandemic in itself, which is transforming the world by spreading heat. And heat is a kind of terrible virus, which can destroy mankind. And then we should add now, as if we knew that the climate pandemic was next door to us. We are not doing it quickly. I heard some people speaking of a Marshall Plan, but the Marshall Plan was peanuts compared to the 12 trillion that we are pouring on the world economy today, and we don't use it really seriously to reorient our economy to the economy of life, which is health, hygiene, education, digitals, clean energy, food, agriculture, and the real sectors that are important for our future, where the demand has been demonstrated very high and the supply very low.
Are you thinking about the developing countries, Excellency, or just you're thinking about the industrialized world? Because when we speak about green, developing countries do not have or cannot afford to have green development as a major priority for them.
I understand, and I speak of the world, because if you do not do worldwide, not only green, but I say life economy, not green economy, because green economy is a small part of life economy. We need to understand that it's an opportunity, a window of opportunity that will not come very often in the 21st century, to go not only to green economy, but to life economy. If we go only to green economy, it will not be enough to get rid of the pandemics and other issues. And it's important for the emerging countries. And the emerging countries can do it. For instance, take the example of mobile phone. The emerging countries went to mobile phone without going to the fixed line. And then they can make a leapfrog and go through shortcuts to development. Yeah, therefore, I do believe that getting rid of coal will be easier in countries of emerging markets, even if it's difficult, I know, in India or in China and some others. But if they want to do it, they can do it much better than countries such as Poland or Germany, which are a very long tradition of using it. It's a matter of global will. And I do think that we should put green economy within the context of economy of life and move into that direction. And I do think that emerging countries can even lead the way.
As usual, your words of wisdom are echo around the world. Thank you very much, Excellency. I wish we had more time, but I'm told that we have to leave the stage for the next panel. Thank you so much, and I appreciate your words of wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you, my dear Dr. Bassem, and merci beaucoup, Jacques, pour cette grande conversation. Thank you both. So our next session features another sustainability hero, someone who dares to have a vision that others thought was impossible. He made history by accomplishing the first ever non-stop around the world balloon flight. With a vision to demonstrate the immense potential of renewable energies, he then initiated the famous Solar Impulse Challenge and circumnavigated the globe in an airplane powered by solar energy. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the virtual stage of the FII Institute, the chairman of the Solar Impulse Foundation, my dear friend, Dr. Bertrand Piccard. How are you, Bertrand? Good to see you
Hello,
again.
Richard.
Thank you for your patience. As you can see...
very much for this invitation.
No,
Really
it's
happy
a
to be
very inspiring conversation. I wish we could have more time, but I'm sure we will be able to see it again and again. Bertrand, as an explorer, you have achieved what many thought was impossible, the kind of global system change we need right now will appear daunting to many leaders. So having made the impossible possible, what mindset do you think we should embrace if we are to deliver a sustainable world?
I believe that the pioneering spirit that the world needs means to identify what are the habits, what are the paradigms on which our way of thinking is based, and try something else. And to give you the example with the environment, for decades, the paradigm was that protection of the environment was expensive, was requiring a lot of subsidies and a lot of sacrifice from the population. With the pioneering spirit, we break paradigms, we break the rules, and we invent another trajectory, which would be, for example, for the environment, to see if environmental protection could be profitable and not expensive. If it could bring enthusiasm for the population instead of sacrifice. And this is possible today. This is possible. The technologies have made such a huge jump in efficiency that today we gain more money and we create more jobs by protecting the environment rather than destroying it. And this is thanks to efficiency, because our world up to now was not efficient. It was a world of waste. Today, efficiency opens a completely new market. It's the market of the century to build efficient infrastructures, efficient building, efficient ways to produce the energy, efficient ways to produce food. Everything can be so much more efficient because today the world is wasting half of the energy production, half of the food production, half of the renewable, half of the resources, natural resources, and even the waste are wasted because they could be useful resources. So you see the fantastic work in progress that we can do, and this is the market of the century, even for people who don't believe that the environment is in danger.
Bertrand, you talk about sustainability through the lens of profitability, and your 1000 Solutions initiative is a core component of that. So please tell us more about this initiative and what it aims to achieve.
Yes, with pleasure. My goal is to speak the language of the people that I would like to convince. The key decision makers today are obsessed by profit, job creation, being re-elected. So let's tell them the same language, how to make more profit, how to create more jobs, and how to be re-elected. And as a proof of that, with my Solar Impulse Foundation, we have launched the challenge of selecting and labeling 1,000 solutions who can be clean technologies, renewable energies, systems, devices, products, materials. that protect the environment in a financially profitable way. And we have experts who are assessing the fact that it is really profitable for the industry who produces it as much as for the consumer who uses it. Today, we are more than halfway. We have 550 solutions labeled, 550 technological proofs that you can make a lot of money and create a lot of jobs by protecting the environment. That means by being more efficient in our industry, our agriculture, our economy, and our finance.
Bertrand, I just got a question from one of our participants, which is quite interesting. So if you don't mind, I would like to ask, climate apart, what do you see as the biggest risks? If we don't get the economic recovery reach and orient the finance correctly, so what do you see would be the biggest risk now, apart climate?
Today, there is no opposition between climate, environment, and economic recovery. Of course, today there are a lot of people who are suffering, who lost their job, who went bankrupt. These people will not accept that we just speak of protection of the environment when they are starving or losing their house. So it has to be together. And today, the recovery has to be a recovery into efficient production, industry, and consumption. If it is not aimed at efficiency, the recovery will not happen. If we inject the $12 trillion to recover what we had before, that means an inefficient society, there will be no jobs because it will just cost too much for nothing. But if you inject this money to put all the solutions in place, to choose all the solutions that exist and implement them, each time we can be more efficient in water, energy, mobility, construction, agriculture, industry, then the new world will be more profitable. The new world will offer more workplaces. The new world will also offer a better environmental protection, by the way. But efficiency brings as much for the environment as for the economy. And this is what people have to understand today. Even the climate change deniers, even the people who are not caring about the environment, they have to understand that all the new technologies today, which are cheaper to use than the old technologies, are logical even more than ecological. And people can just go on the website of the Solar Impulse Foundation and see which are these 550 solutions that exist today. It's a miracle of technology. It's a miracle of the creativity of innovators, sometimes in startups, sometimes in big companies, but they are ready to be implemented. It would be such a waste not to encourage or oblige the industry to use them and implement them with all the trillions of dollars that are offered to them to prepare the world of tomorrow.
Bertrand, you are and you will always be a young man. I know that. So you inspire young climate activists around the world, and right now they are eager for a seat at the table and to push for change. What is your message to them?
My message is that the climate activists have to speak the language of the economy, of the industry, and of the political world. The goal is not to fight against the industry. The goal is to make an alliance with the industry and see how the industry can diversify, can become more efficient, can open new markets. There are so many new markets. All the circular economy around waste, it's a new market. So my goal is not to fight against people who are producing oil. Not at all. We still need oil. My goal is to help them to diversify. You have a company like Schlumberger, who is specialized in oil exploration. They are making now a fantastic diversification into drilling inside the cities to install geothermic heat pumps for all the buildings in the city. This is clever. We do not destroy what exists, but we extend new applications, new opportunities. And the oil companies, they are rich, they have technology, they have knowledge and experience. They would be a fantastic help now to diversify to a hydrogen industry. We need their help. So to the activists, I say, create synergies, collaboration, be inclusive. Don't just fight to destroy, because we will not be able to build something better by destroying. We build something better by diversification and improvement of the efficiency of what exists.
Thank you, Bertrand. By the way, you know, Schlumberger is a company where I did 35 years ago my engineering school internship. So I see we are still innovative. So thank you very much, Bertrand. Thank you for your time. We hope to see you again very soon, and I hope no later than end of October in Riyadh at the FII annual meeting. Thank you, Bertrand. Merci beaucoup.
I would love that, and I will see you there, and congratulations. Bye-bye. Bye, and goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, Bertrand. So now I would like to introduce the COO of the FII Institute, who will introduce our next and last segment, my dear friend and colleague, Rakan Tarabzoni. Thank you for continuing to watch. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard. Now that we've discussed what it takes to turn vision into action, we have three special contributors, three amazing successful ladies who will share their concrete innovations and ideas, which are in line with the Institute's vision for a greener and more sustainable future. I would like to start with the Executive Director of the Green Digital Finance Alliance, Ms. Marianne Haar.
Thank you so much. With the Green Digital Finance Alliance, we were born in 2017 because it's time to rethink green finance. Really, the habits of green finance currently is to focus on commitments. We have great initiatives like Principles for Responsible Investment. We have Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance. But a lot of these initiatives, they were born more than the Principles for Responsible Investment were born more than 15 years ago. And look where we are today. Of the $1 trillion bond market, only 2% are green. We have only 1% of the fund market that is labeled ESG. And we have only 5 to 10% of bank loans that are green, and that's only in countries where it's actually measured. So we need an additional avenue to committing financial service institutions to do different allocation of capital. We need an avenue that's paved by digital innovation. Digital innovation brings to green finance a number of ways to rethink it. It offers to re-innovate capital markets so they better respond to the size of the green assets. The majority of green assets never travel to capital markets because they're too small. With digital finance, you can issue a bond that corresponds to the level and capital needs of the green asset. You can also get to another regime where we have assets directly reporting green metrics rather than a company disclosing it. So you can actually trust your green investments. But what I want to focus on is that you can also unlock the trillions of savings that are sitting that are sleeping at the moment in savings accounts of you and me and of citizens around the world. And there are actually quite a number of these innovations already out there. We work with the UN, we've worked with the G20 to map out these innovations globally. It's green robo-advice, as we've seen in Germany, where you can allocate part of your savings to get a return and invest in a greener future. It's also a payment card you can get in the Nordics that has an inbuilt carbon limit. So once you have purchased enough embedded carbon through your everyday purchases, it will simply block and you can't consume anymore. Or it's these types of digitally enabled retail government securities that we see in Indonesia or other parts of Southeast Asia, where states are actually starting to say, let's raise green capital with our citizens rather than doing it in international capital markets, and thereby having to service debt outside rather than service debt to our citizens. And now you may sit and think, but that's all good and fine. But are these innovations really scaled? And we work with the biggest green digital champion in the world. It's 500 million people that if they use this mobile wallet and they download an application called Ant Forest, then what they get is that they invite algorithms to automatically analyze 18 of their behaviors and give them an automated real-time carbon footprint on these behaviors. When they then start to change their behaviors so they decrease their carbon footprint, they then get rewarded by digital green energy points. When they have transitioned to sufficiently carbon light lifestyles and they have enough green energy points, they can start to plant a virtual tree on the platform. And that platform is then transitioned or translated into a real tree that's planted in real time. And they get drones to take pictures and get that directly to the user so the user can see real time their green impact. That is 550 million people now using that carbon wallet to actually be part of climate finance. Climate finance that with the Paris Agreement is mainly made available for big corporates or for states, is now also through fintech being made available to citizens. So the 500 million can also travel to be part of the more than 7 billion people we are in the world if we deploy fintech wisely to invite people in to become action-oriented and put their capital into climate finance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Har. Our next contributor is a very close partner and friend of the FII Institute. Please welcome to the stage the CEO of X Prize Foundation, Dr. Anousheh Ansari.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be with you and join this amazing group of contributors. I'm CEO of X Prize Foundation, but I thought I'll tell you a little bit more about X Prize by giving you a little bit of history. I played actually a role in the initial competition, the Ansari X Prize, and we were the title sponsors of that. That's what basically ignited a great spark in how we can build a platform to solve humanity's greatest challenges. Of course, when you have something new, people are skeptical, but with X Prize, we are setting out to do something that may seem impossible, but we believe anything that's a crazy idea is just an amazing opportunity for us to attack and use innovation to solve it. And we use a competition platform to crowdsource that innovation and inspire millions of people around the world. Doesn't matter where they're from, what their education is, what they studied, what their interest is. If they are focused on a problem, we believe that collaboration and crowdsourcing can bring about a really innovative solution to solve our biggest challenges in the world. And we want to do this because we want to create impact around these solutions and push them forward into new markets, create new markets, new opportunities, and really attack those problems. With the first one, we all had ambitions about space. I grew up wanting to go to space and become an astronaut as a young girl, and that dream seemed impossible because I was not part of a space program, a government space program. So democratizing access to space was at the heart of when XPRIZE started about 25 years ago. And our ambition was to basically ask the world to build a spaceship, the private sector to build a spaceship to go to edge of space and demonstrate that it's possible. And it took a long time. It took about 15 years, 10 years for the competition, and then another 5 years for it to flourish. But it demonstrated, when we had 11 teams competing, it demonstrated that even building a spaceship, it's a possibility for small, very focused, innovative teams. And we figured that if we can solve access to space, why not tackle other problems? So our work is focused in many different areas now, and we have launched even more than this, closer to $200 million worth of competitions, and we reached 2 million plus people around the globe, and we have another 300 million of new competitions that are in development. But basically, we try to look at challenges in three main areas. One is exploration, where our history comes from, exploration off planet, on planet, looking at our oceans. There's so much we don't know about our own planet still. And also exploring the human mind and the boundaries of human mind and consciousness. We also look at equity. Equity is a very important topic for XPRIZE. We look at basically Maslow's hierarchy of need, the bottom part of that, and we look at it how we can address those issues through competitions, and then environment, which is a big area for us. With competitions around environment, we are looking at one of the topics that has been discussed a lot, which is carbon. We have an active carbon XPRIZE that is in the final stages. We have 10 teams who have received $5 million and looking at turning the output of a coal plant or a natural gas plant to consumer products. When we started this in 2015, no one was talking about this. It was an issue that was of great importance, and we wanted to push the boundaries of technologies to create the circular carbon economy around building things of value from CO2. And we're in the final stages and hope to be able to address this and award the competition in early part of 2021. Some of the products you see here on the screen, these are available today in the market. When we started, there was nothing like this, but now building consumer product is something of great interest. And many of these companies, you all talked about investment, many of the companies competing in our finals are looking for investors and would really benefit from support to be able to get these solutions into the hand of the consumers and into the market and make real impact. But we're not stopping there, because as you know, we can just look at, looking at taking carbon out of that we're producing, but we've already produced so much carbon that it's important for us to create innovations that would not only stop but maybe even reverse the climate change. And we're looking at launching a competition that would actually accelerate technologies and breakthroughs in taking carbon out of the atmosphere. And we're looking at accelerating it into getting them to scale to gigaton levels, because that's what's needed to address our climate change issue today. As any of our competitions, we are not trying to limit how the solution works. So we're leaving it very open to allow for any type of technology to enter and compete for this competition. And we would, again, love your ideas, support on getting this out there, because it's important to have these type of technologies accelerate and advance. And around that, to create impact, we have launched a circular carbon network. It was the first carbon network fund that we introduced, and it's already has a lot of impact funds and companies who are looking for investment in these technologies, and as well as companies that are building technologies participating and connecting them with the investors. We love to create more alliances around these topics and create accelerators that will enable these young companies to actually become very successful and flourishing companies in the future. And hopefully with forums like this and other activities, we can also impact and push policy changes out there to enable us to address these problems. I thank you for the time you've given me to tell you more about our work. And if you like to know more, you can join us at xprize.org and learn more about our competitions. And hopefully we'll see you as partners on the other side.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ansari. Now for our final contributor, someone who has combined her passion for sustainability and space, creating real solutions to benefit humanity. Please welcome Ms. Barbara Belvisi.
Hi everyone, I'm very happy to be here today and to contribute to this beautiful and very inspiring event where we're trying to find out solutions so we can take care and protect our planet. So I'm the CEO of a company called Interstellar Lab, and we are exactly combining two passions, so space and sustainability on Earth. Because my point of view was that becoming a multi-planet species is, for me, is a very exciting future, but I don't see the point of going to another planet if we're not able to maintain and to protect life that we have on Earth right now. So the mission of the company is to help humans live in harmony with their environment on any planet, starting with this one. So how do we do that? So our goal is to build closed loops, self-sustaining villages with what we call the regenerative environmental technology. So the problems we are trying to solve is basically we're facing on Earth right now. Key problems that we need to completely shift to regenerative technology. So regenerative technology means that yes, so there is a necessity, thank you. There is a necessity for the future of human civilization on Earth to switch to regenerative technology. So regenerative technologies are technology that are reusing, that are completely closing the loop, that basically what we consume is reused and re-put into a very circular economy and circular system. And that's an approach that we need to do on Earth right now. And we have basically 10 coming years to focus on that and how to implement this technology. What is interesting is that during these 10 years that we will be focusing on Earth and developing the systems so we can bring solutions for a more regenerative way of living on this planet. At the same time, there are different groups of people that are focusing on other planets, on taking humanity to the moon, back to the moon, and then on a future to Mars. And so during the 10 coming years, we will need to develop the systems that are needed for humans to live on another planet, and especially to live on Mars. But if you think about it, the technology and the system that we need on Mars needs to be regenerative. You cannot keep to have an open loop approach when you go to another planet. You need to build a system where you produce your food, you regenerate the air, you recycle the waste, and where you cycle the water in a closed loop system. And that's exactly the same technology and the same approach that we need to implement right now on Earth during those 10 coming years. So is there a way that we can use technology designed for future space settlement to help us on Earth transition to regenerative solution? And that's what we're trying to do at Interstellar Lab. And to do so, our approach is to build bioregenerative villages, which are called eBios. So experimental experimental bioregenerative station. So we're planning on building 10 stations on Earth before building one on Mars. Eventually, we'll do some testing on the Moon as well. So stations are designed as a completely self-sustaining closed-loop habitat. The goal is to build a station, so 10 stations, each of them will be designed for 150 people, completely self-sustaining, where we can produce our own food, recycle the water, produce the air that people will breathe inside the station, and recycle everything. But to do that, we do that in a very steady way. So before building a full-scale station for 150 people, we start by building a module that is designed for 5 people. And then over 5 years, basically, we can grow the small module into small villages. That's our approach. The key technology that we have inside IBIOS, so basically it's composed of a controlled environment agriculture system where we develop our own aeroponic system combined with a controlled environment greenhouse where we recreate the ideal condition in a completely sealed environment for plant to growth. It's connected to a water and a waste management system where we use both biochemical and physicochemical technology to recycle the water, to turn black water into direct potable water locally without using the power of a big water treatment system plant next to it. So it's a very autonomous and independent way of recycle all the water and the waste, and all of that. So combined with an habitat, and all of that is controlled by by an algorithm that allow us to predict how the station is going to behave, and that is also combined with a lot of sensors that are measuring in real time the level of CO2, of nitrate, of O2, of lightning, so we can make sure we are very energy efficient and we optimize the functioning of the station. Our goal, so as I said, is to build 10 stations on this planet before we aim for Mars. The 5 first stations that we are planning on building will be located. So 2 in the United States. We are currently working on 1 in California. We were hoping to start the construction at the end of this year, but we had to adapt with the crisis. So it's going to be more probably that you'll see the first demonstrator early 2021. The second station, we're planning on building it in Florida, next to the Kennedy Space Center. The third one, it's going to be rather Spain or Saudi Arabia, depending on how fast we move on designing the plan and building up the partnership. And then there is one that is planned in Germany. We're also aiming for regions that are very, very cold. We're choosing location to have very extreme and different conditions so we can iterate on the design and we can improve our system. The goal for us is to be able to design a framework for sustainable living on this planet and on other planets at the same time. Because if we thought of designing for the very first time on Earth all the system completely closed loop, we will not have to go through the transition right now. So we are using Mars to find a solution that will help us to build better solutions on our planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Valisi. Amazing day. We've had a lot of comments and feedback from all of our speakers, and we have an amazing lineup of speakers today. Before we wrap up, I just want to quickly iterate on the FII event that we're having at the end of this year. This will be the 4th edition since the inception of 2017. The theme this year is the Neo-Renaissance, which is a response to the imperative of the re-energizing of the global economy through the collective sustainable action. FII, over the course of the past 4 years, has garnered recognition of the business and investment community, and it became one of the top investment platforms in the world. It was also recognized by heads of states, decision makers, and policymakers all over the world as an important vehicle for the significant national investment opportunities to be shared with the world. Just to give you a quick wrap up on what happened in the past 3 years over the FII and what was accomplished, we've had over 14,000 delegates attending our events. Over 500 international top C-level speakers coming from 150 countries. We've had over 85 partners that represents the most prominent international companies, tech companies, and academia. To top it all off, the deal size that were done in the past 3 years in the FII on the platform were over $100 billion in value. The Institute was launched earlier this year to further anchor this platform and equip it with the right resources to fulfill the vision and mandate. And that is investments with the good of humanity and with a positive impact on humanity. The Institute's mandate is to fill a gap in the investment world as an action-driven catalyst for the strategic decision with a positive impact on humanity, which is our main element. This is really our competitive advantage. That's why we have four areas that we focus on that we will build up the whole institution's direction on, and they are the robotics, sustainability, healthcare, and AI. Today, we've learned insights on the importance of driving green recovery, and we've had lots of quotes here to be shared. But due to the lack of time, we'll move forward. We will continue to engage with some of the brightest minds worldwide to shed light on the new concepts, innovations, and ideas on some of the most critical challenges our world is facing today. I encourage you all to visit our website to learn more about what we do and what's our mission. And I look forward to see you all in October FII 20 annual event. Thank you so much for joining us and have a nice day.